Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. In 2017, an increasing number of companies reported they did not have effective insider threat detection methods. LogRhythm's UEBA solutions enable you to detect and neutralize user-based threats in real time, while built-in scenario and behavior-based analytics empower you to expose insider threats, compromised accounts, and privilege misuse. Visit LogRhythm.com to learn how their UEBA solutions can help you expand visibility and enhance detection capabilities. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join me in welcoming Joe McManus, who's an expert and industry advisor in the field of information security. He is currently the CISO of Automox, provider of cloud-based cross-platform patching software, who is also a sponsor of this network. And it's like, not only am I the Hair Club president, I'm also a client. We use Automox here at Security Weekly. Very happy and impressed with the product. Joe's got an awesome background in security. When we caught up earlier this week, he was talking about how he's a senior researcher at CERT. He's a professor, and he is going for his PhD. So you're like busy, dude, huh? Joe, welcome to the show.
Welcome, man. It's nice to finally get on the chat with you. Yeah, I like to keep busy, but the lucky thing is it's all in security, and I love that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So, Joe, tell us, give our audience like a little kind of rundown of your background. We were kind of comparing notes. We've been in the industry around the same amount of time, and you've had a really, really cool career in the past 18 years or so.
Yeah, I was at a company that got hacked, and this is way back when all the Windows admins were really just getting those like 2-week crash courses to get their MCSA, and it was a Windows box that got hacked, and they asked us, the Unix admins, to take a look at it. And it was just a vulnerability in IIS that got popped. And I found the investigation super interesting. So then, like 2 months later, I changed jobs to be a consultant in security. And then I got hired at CERT at Carnegie Mellon to work on some security things, initially doing large-scale network analysis using a lot of NetFlow and designing and deploying sensors at DoD and DHS. And then I switched to another team in CERT, which was called digital forensics, which at the time was really an emerging field. And I got to work on some really cool cases like the NASDAQ hack and a bunch of other things for federal law enforcement. And you can get basically anybody to come and do incident response, but I really like programming, and I really like being a sysadmin, network engineer. So figuring out how can I automate this stuff for people who don't really know all those different fields. So coming back, building a bunch of tools. And while I was there, I got my master's degree from CMU. And then I moved back to Colorado, where I led R&D for an AV company, sort of the Skunk Works division. Then I was the director of security at a startup. And during this time, I was an adjunct professor at CU, where I teach graduate courses in InfoSec. Then I actually went full-time back to being a professor and a researcher at CERT. And a bunch of the folks I was at the startup started up Automox. And so they asked me to come on as the CISO a couple years ago. And that's really awesome, because I think we were talking about this, Paul. 5 years ago, we were still convincing people that security mattered. Right. And every discussion with programmers and developers, you were saying, hey, you really need to secure this feature. Here's a possible exploit. And I'd hear back, well, we're behind the firewall. Nobody cares. We're on an admin network. Nobody cares. But I think like in the 2017 report I saw from the Software Engineering Institute, 27% of all attacks were from insiders. and that was at a cost of 50% more than other hacks because of their privileged access. So, we had to do that conversation. Well, what's really neat now is that, security is thought of as part of what you have to do every day. And when Automox, the guys from Automox approached me a couple years ago, they said we want to make this tool secure from the ground up. So, our product secure, our infrastructure secure. It's just great being at a company where security is part of our design discussions. It's just part of our DNA.
Yeah, and that's really awesome because there's a certain level of trust that you have to have as some of your solution is cloud-based and client-based. And I have to say the usability and the implementation is awesome. I haven't done any security testing on it, but we're glad that you're there ensuring that product line is secure, which is great.
Yeah. And you said the cloud-based thing is really interesting because you see a lot of companies now saying, we're on the cloud, we're secure, behind AWS. But it's like, well, they're not patching your box. They're not running yum update. They're not doing any log analysis. They're not, they haven't configured your VPC for you. So there's that whole sort of misconception that the cloud's secure, and it's only secure if you make it secure.
Right. Now, there's a couple of interesting initiatives, Joe, that you talked about earlier. One was addressing that problem where, students graduate from a program and we want them to help us with our patching. We want them to help us with our cloud security. But how do they get real world experience? And I thought you had an awesome solution for this.
Yeah, so I found a problem. My students were graduating, and if you go to LinkedIn and you look at some of the job recs for security people, it's either no experience and you're going to work the third shift in a SOC, or 20 years experience and you can speak the binary language of moisture evaporators. Star Wars for you there.
Right. Nice.
And they it's hard to get that first job. So what I thought was, well, how can I get them this experience? I hate to have someone spend 2 years in a program getting all these skills and then not being able to apply them for 3 or 4 years. So what I did is I reached out to some local companies. I reached out to the university and said, hey, can I build a SOC where my students will work in there and they'll assist you, right? And one of the cool things was the University of Colorado only has 2.5 FTE for their entire security group. Mm-hmm. So what I did is say, hey, I've got 40 students, and what we can do is we can add to that. So one of the things I have them do is we actually run, we log into their tools. So we log into their SIM, and they do your basic everyday analysis. They do your triage. I have it so the second year students are the escalation point for the first year students, and they can escalate all the way up to the folks on campus who are doing the actual incident response. And it led to actually internships for the students. And one of what I think is really neat is there's only 2.5 FTE at the University of Colorado that are doing security, but they're great FTE. These folks are doing really good work, and the students were able to assist them, and there's a great way they get experience. They learn some of the terminology, and so the first time they're in the field, they're not just kind of fish out of water. It's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. If we have time at the end, we'll talk about your PhD work, or have you back on to talk about that, because I knew we previously ran a little over. But I want to talk about enterprise patching, and you talked about being on the early days and there's IIS vulnerabilities, right? When I was actually working as an FTE at a university doing security, and man, what a challenge that was to just get your hands around that concept of patching. And we fast forward to today, I still feel like while, as you I think rightfully pointed out, it's much more of a focus, but enterprises are still very much struggling with this fundamental, what I think is blocking and tackling of getting all of their operating systems and third-party software patched. Why is this still a problem, and what are some of the main challenges today?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. If you follow any of the blogs, if you go to some talks at conferences, people are talking about the next huge APT. People can bounce a laser off an Ethernet cable and figure out what you're typing.
Right.
Well, that's cool, but nobody's doing that, right? But people are still getting in because the virtual windows and doors are unlocked, and that's your patching. That's your out-of-date patches. I think was it January of this year, or maybe it was last year, that the Ukrainian power grid got knocked offline. So that's a cyber physical attack, right? And they got knocked offline because of a 10-year-old missing patch.
Right.
Like, that's ridiculous. I mean, I don't even know how you could run a system that's not constantly trying to update itself for a 10-year-old patch. So the challenges I think people see is that in production environments, they're scared to do that patching. They don't, or there's so many machines, they've got Linux boxes here, Macs here, Windows boxes here, and something's falling off, right? Maybe they've got Yum Update running automatically or Yum Cron Security, but on the Windows side, they're not doing anything. Or on the Mac side, that's the Wild West. Users just do whatever they want to do. And that's really not sustainable because we just keep seeing these vulnerabilities. What was it? In May, there were, was it 60 patches for Patch Tuesday that were released? And 2 of them were like 0 days for out-of-date vulnerabilities. I'm sorry, out-of-date software that had really easy vulnerabilities. Wasn't WannaCry SMB v1? I mean, how is that still running?
Right.
So what we did here at Automox is we wanted to figure out how can we make this easier. So we spent, I think rightfully so, we spent a lot of time on the UI because if you're going to sit in there and look at it, we want it to be really easy to use, and we want it to give you great reporting, and also, frankly, be a little, eye-catching, So we make it really easy to install the client on Linux, on Mac, on Windows. You can just use curl and install it, run command. You can download a package. They automatically enroll. We've got different policies. So, I
can speak to that from firsthand experience, Joe, because John Strand and I were actually talking about the skills gap, as it were, as we were discussing before, and how, like you said, those 2.5 FTEs are like ninjas, right? Like we talked about before, they've been a developer, they've worked at the help desk, they've been a sysadmin, they spent some time in the network team, right? But not everyone's like that. Like there's usually 1 or maybe 2, FTEs, maybe in larger organizations more, that have that expertise. Do you want those folks in your patching solution, like really hands-on every day as part of their operations, going, here's where we need to apply patches, here's how we do patching? No, you want to pass that off to maybe someone doesn't have a security background at all that can do that level of patching. I mean, and that's what we did here, right? Like our operations team here at Security Weekly, they're not 20, 30-year veterans in security, right? They're operations people, and I'm like, I need a solution that I can give to them and have myself as a security person define the requirements and give that to someone else. If the product's not usable, I can't do that.
Absolutely. Like you said, you don't want to have your senior people running patches. But the neat thing about, let's say, a cloud platform is that you can have the operations team running those patches, but have folks in the security group log in and look for those missing patches or machines that haven't been updated. I did an incident response for a .gov, and one of their boxes had been popped and was used for pushing out malware. And if you looked, it hadn't been updated in 7 months, and they actually had an alert, but they just hadn't noticed it. So that was kind of unfortunate, but they had just hundreds of thousands of machines, so it's understandable. But you want that kind of visibility. But to your point, you do need security people who are network engineers, sysadmins, developers, and we actually try to facilitate your security folks. We have an open API that you can use to develop against. So you could have those DevOps folks or those security folks, writing some custom Python scripts to get reporting out of, to make changes and things like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so you appeal to both audiences in that respect, which is great. What was the decision behind supporting the 3 major platforms? In my research, I think there's a lot of solutions that focus on one platform or the other. Of course, if your Windows team is really good, you can do that all straight in Windows, right? Your Linux team can be really good. They can do that all in Linux. I don't know that there's necessarily a Mac OS team, like you said. Usually it's just people kind of off on their own, and while you may have those seasoned professionals doing that on Windows and Linux, maybe OS 10 as well, but I think that they might have different processes, or they may leave out an entire class of operating systems. So like what was some of the driving factors behind supporting all 3, which I think is pretty unique in this space?
To be honest, it's because that's what we run, right? We wanted to do something to fix the problem we were having. So we've got people with Intel NUCs plugged into their their monitors with a Mac next to it, and then Windows running in a bunch of VMs. So we were thinking, oh, we need to fix our own problem. So that's why we did it. And also, I mean, everything is moving to be faster now, right? You've got the CI/CD process. We've all read the Phoenix project, right? How do you don't want to duplicate 3 teams doing this patching?
Yeah.
Why not just make it one simple spot and have it? So also it's one tool, but if you have a Windows team and a Linux team and that rare group that has a Mac team, let them all log into one spot and do it. And also, you don't know if is your attack going to come. Your attacker doesn't care that your Windows team is awesome and patching constantly, but your Linux team's patching every other week. So why not just do it all in one spot?
Yeah, and I think the problem and challenge that it solves, and this is from our small environment here all the way up to the largest enterprises, is that scheduling and prioritizing those fixes. And having a unified tool to do that across all 3 platforms is awesome. I mean, a lot of folks struggle with just one platform doing that. Talk about that problem and that solution where I want to schedule patches because I can't necessarily apply all patches as soon as they come out to every single system, right? That's usually not good.
No, absolutely. I think we've all deployed a patch at some point that had either a problem, like I think there was some of the Spectre and Meltdown patches, bricked some boxes. And then if you're using custom software, right? You maybe you've written a bunch of code in Python or PHP or something, and you install a package that breaks that. You don't want to have that happen. So you can create multiple policies in our tool, and what you can do is have it roll out to dev first, roll out to the workstations, and then roll out to prod. And you can create schedules for that. I mean, heck, you said you're using it. So if you were to roll out a patch and have it deploy while you're recording, that would be pretty terrible. So you want reliability and predictability in your patching tool.
And that's exactly why we had to adopt this technology, right? Is because there's a mixture of all 3 platforms that support the show, and we don't want to have 3 separate processes, and we want to be able to control when a patch is installed. And it's interesting that by applying the patch, we're trying to prevent a situation where we could have downtime, but at the same time, a patch could have the exact same result that, let's say, ransomware has. We're pretty close, right? I mean, that system's down, right? We can't have that.
Yeah, and unlike ransomware, if you send bitcoins to me to help you fix it, it'll get done. I see you got 2 laptops on your desk there. What are you running on both those?
Yeah, so this one right here on my left is Linux, and this one on my right, you're gonna laugh because we had this conversation, is actually a Chromebook.
Oh, okay. So now that looks like you've got a Mac hardware running Linux there, then, right?
No, it kind of looks like it's actually from a company called System 76. They're not a sponsor of the show, but I really love their products. So there you go.
That's System 76. Get them some sponsorship.
That's right. That's right. If you're listening from System 76, I fully endorse your products. They're awesome.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I run Linux on a separate machine I use that's standalone, but I end up using a Mac for my day-to-day because I spend a lot of time in PowerPoint. Yeah,
I have an iMac as well. So it's interesting how we all end up in this situation where, all these platforms are definitely in use, and it's nice to be able to unify that solution. Can you, Joe, talk about the importance and some of the challenges associated with third-party patching and patching those third-party apps, right? I mean, that's still, again, something that people struggle with today.
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at Equifax, right? I mean, it's the biggest hack in recent memory. And why did that happen? Because they had an out-of-date library that they used for their website. So, I mean, it was Apache Struts, right?
It was Struts, yes.
Yeah. So now, to be honest, if you run yum update, apt-get update, whatever, you're not going to get that Struts patch because that's a third-party library. So you need to look at those things. You need to combine your patching as part of your defense in depth with a tool like Nessus or Rapid7 or something that's doing that automated scanning and looking for these out-of-date things. What did Reagan say? Trust but verify. So you need to have that. But with a third-party patch, you need to either include that into your either make a custom RPM or a custom deb, or include it in your patching software, which we can include third-party patches into Automox. But that's super important. I mean, I personally can't believe that Equifax is still in business after such an egregious error. I mean, that there's just no excuse for what they did with their crazy out-of-date patch. And like you said, you've got different patching policies and different schedules for your software. So if you had a test box that only housed your let's say you've got a Raspberry Pi set up with a whole bunch of MAME-style games on it, right? That's fine. Patch that 2 weeks later. But your production system that's housing tons and tons of PII, I mean, you should be testing and then 2 hours later be deploying, right? There's no excuse for having it be around out of patched in production for that long. But I think we saw with those guys, they just did a lot of really bad security. What was it? I think like a couple of days later, they found a site in their South American infrastructure that had the password admin and the username admin.
Yes, there was subsequent issues with Equifax. And I mean, my assessment was you could tell there was no security culture, which kind of brings me to my next question that I think a lot of folks deal with. In a security role, you're typically talking, let's say, to your Windows systems administrators. There's a lot of, in a lot of organizations, there's a lot of friction there. The security team wants those patches applied. The Windows team is like, yeah, no. So how do you do that communications effectively to make sure that these patches are getting applied? And then how do you manage that process and have a facility to test these, right? In Automox, you can say, like, don't apply this patch, but how do you test these in a larger enterprise, for example?
So I think there's like two parts to that question. And the first one is sort of a discussion I've been having with a lot of security people, and I think there's definitely two camps on it. And some security groups are kind of revel in being in the group of no. I worked with a security person a long time ago who told me they love being the security officer for this project because they could be a jerk. And I was like, that's horrible, right? Terrible. Nobody wants to work with you. They're going to circumvent security. Yeah. So, I mean, it's terrible. Some people love that. They like having some control. But security is successful if you are an enabler. If the company sees you as someone who will help them with the problem, then you'll get included earlier. So let's say the Windows team sees the security group because of their background as network engineers, as system administrators, as programmers, as someone who can help, right? You can that security group can work with the Windows group to say, okay, we know this is a critical patch you must deploy, but you also have critical systems that must stay up, right? I mean, in some places you've got critical systems. Like think about the medical world where they're hooked up to people, right? Think about SCADA installations that are hooked up to power plants, things like that, or water plants. It's totally critical infrastructure. But you can work to develop a policy where you test that maybe you can have the security team have access to the dev environment and they can roll out patches there, or they can assist. You can have someone on the team assist with someone on the Windows team, and they can do a planned deployment together. You obviously, if you're in a system like that, you've got some sort of change control process. So if your change control process allows you to have testing and things like that, well, you have to have testing. I was just a comment, but you really need to develop a plan. I like to have. I mean, some security folks aren't really into policy, but policy is super important for your security posture. So maybe you have a policy that if it's a critical patch, it gets deployed in 24 hours. So you've got some management support behind, behind that patching, and not just two engineers who are trying to get it done.
Well, it's a great point, Joe, and I'm glad you kind of went down this path because it reminds me of the policies that we have here and that I've implemented in other jobs too that really have been imposed upon me. And I learned from that is in the change control process, when you have to fill out a form, like you're going to go make a change, I fill out a form and it's okay, like, what are you changing? What systems are affected potentially by this change? And I think most important, so when things go wrong, because they likely will at some point, right? Maybe not with every change, but most changes, things are going to go wrong. What's your backup plan? And you have to define that and then notify the appropriate parties. I think what that does is it tells everyone that's involved, like, oh, I know that the system's down because someone is making a change. If it's not going well, I know that they have X amount of time and their backup plan is to revert back to that patch or whatever it is and then go do some more testing and try again. I think you need that in place because we know, like, patches break things, and I think change control and being able to reverse the change is important.
Yeah, we actually have a rollback feature, so you can make a change to a policy and then hit the roll. So that's going to push out new patches, and if you decide that that's not working, you can hit a button to roll that back. So you actually just remove that instead of having to go and modify the policy by hand again. But what you said about having the idea how to back out your change control, I think another important thing that's sort of overlooked with change control is when do you decide that the change isn't working? What are your gates to take out to say, okay, stop, let's roll this back.
That's a great point. And it's not an easy answer either, right? Because it's going to vary depending on the situation, depending on the criticality. I mean, there's so many variables there. And I think it's just experience that kind of tells you as the engineer doing that change, like when it's time to roll back.
Yeah, I think that same experience teaches us all not to make changes on Friday afternoons.
Yeah.
I don't want to work on the weekend.
Well, I think that's how we get into this culture of administrators not wanting to make changes, because they, even with all these safeguards in place, they've been in that situation where maybe they've waited a little too long to back the change out, and their manager or someone else's manager is fuming mad because systems were down.
Right. And that's where I think containerization helps out with a lot of things. Right? You have the ability to just get a new Docker file and rebuild to where you were before. Mm-hmm. So I think that really helps out. But containerization is not the answer for everything, right?
No.
You still have to rebuild your container and update it when there's new patches available too, right? Because your container's not running yum update for or not applying patches realistically, right? So
yeah,
you need to rebuild your containers too.
And in my research too, it doesn't really help all that well in the Windows world. Like, it doesn't play well in the Windows world.
Yeah, definitely see that too.
Yeah. So, Joe, what are some of the other things that are in the product or that people can expect from Automox if they're considering an evaluation today?
So one of the cool things we did is we just rolled out SAML as a feature. So that's been something people really wanted for a while. And then we have two-factor authentication. There's two different ways to do it. There's an email, and then there's the Google Authenticator. Mm-hmm. And I think the Google Authenticator is one of the greatest things that's come out for account-level security recently. We've got that in there. We've got a bunch of really neat features you can do with the API. Our cross-platform features are really, really cool. And then, you can sign up for a free account. You can use it. You can check out how the patching works, how the different policies work. I think their visualization is really cool. So you can check out how the visualization works. I'm kind of a data visualization nerd, so having that in our product is really cool.
Yeah, and what I really like is, one of my requirements was I wanted the status of like the oldest patches that aren't being applied in the system, right? Like, and what that tells me is, in our production environment, right? Like, how deep am I getting in technical debt? Because I know that the more in debt I get, I'm going to have to pay that back at some point. And there's only so much time that we have in between shows, and there's only so much downtime that any enterprise can stand. And I think it gives you a really clear picture of your technical debt when it comes to patching.
Absolutely. And it does take, I don't know if you probably have had to do an audit where it says this patch needs to be applied, and it doesn't take into account that, particularly with Microsoft, their patches end up getting bundled and superseding old patches. Mm-hmm. So our tool understands that. So you don't get stuck in, you're missing MS18-004 when MS18-0012 rolls all the last 8 ones up.
Yeah, and that is actually a huge challenge that I used to work in vulnerability management, right? That's a big challenge, is actually understanding how many vulnerabilities exist on your system in the Microsoft patching scheme.
Yeah, and there's, it's hard to keep up with Microsoft. But I'll throw them credit here, right? They keep patching. They keep releasing patches. And when you see a lot of the hacks people blame on poor Microsoft security, it's because there was a patch for 6 months and people hadn't deployed it. So, and that's part of what you talk about. I think you get a lot of administrators who are scared to touch a system because they don't understand how it works. You've got in-house developers developing this thing. They hand a package off to the sysadmins. Sysadmins get it running once. There's lots of hands-on to make it work, and they're terrified to do a reboot or apply a patch. And that's where I think things like automated patching, containerization, and things like that really help out and sort of break down that fear of like that ogre lives up in the hillside and you're afraid to do a restart.
Now, Joe, for those listening, you can get a free trial from Automox. As we close out, just talk a little bit about the blog series that you write for Automox.
So, in case you haven't guessed by now, I love to talk about nerdy security things, which is probably why I'm a professor too. But on our blog, I cover a bunch of things. Like yesterday, I just published one on sort of on encryption, right? I think a lot of us have an idea of how encryption works, and a lot of the new, encryption now, the math is beyond most security people. Heck, it's beyond most people who aren't pure mathematicians. So I have a one called Pythonic Caesar ciphers, just going over how the basics of encryption work, and how to deploy your own cipher. Now, you wouldn't run it in production, but it gives you an idea of how the ciphers work. And then I've done I do a weekly one on a Linux hack of the week, just because, anybody who's been using Linux long enough. I mean, heck, when I started using it, we just called it Unix, right? You made a distinction between Unix and Linux. But, you just learn things. I just want to share those every week. I do some things on using our API, and try to make it as technical as possible, because that's what I like reading about, right? I actually have one coming up with some, a friend of mine at another startup said, hey, how can we be secure? And it's like, well, there's so many things to do, but here are the top 3 things I could come up with off the top of my head. So check out automox.com/blog, and you'll see we do it. We do a post basically every day. And if you have any things you want covered, send me an email. I'm just McManus@automox.com. I'm happy to cover anything you want. And if you do care about security and encryption, there's a great book, which I hope everyone who's watching this has read, which is the Cryptonomicon. That's just awesome. Have you read that, Paul?
I don't think I have. No, I have not. I need to read that next.
Yeah, I would advise getting it on Audible, because it's I don't know, it's 1,000 pages.
Yeah, that's how I consume books, is on Audible. So yeah, that's good.
Audible, do you sponsor us? Because we could.
No, Audible doesn't sponsor either. Again, I like that product too. No, they don't sponsor.
Yeah, but the Cryptonomicon is a great book on it's a great book on encryption throughout the ages, and the code book by, I think it's Simon Singh, is a really good one too.
Awesome. Joe McManus, who is the current CISO at Automox, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Paul. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. With that, we're going to take a short break. Come back with Enterprise Security News. Stay tuned.